This is my first ever Reddit post, so bear with me. I'll not try to make this too long, and I'll split the whole thing up into additional encounters because my experiences with a psychopath creep span over 3 years' time, and one singular post would end up being a novel. I'll begin by describing my initial encounters with my English professor, John Kerrigan. So, I met a sociopath who beautifully played the role of a normal human being. It took me quite some time to realize he was playing a role that he had been rehearsing for years, giving his grand performance on a day-to-day basis. It took me even longer to realize that I was playing the part of the leading lady, but so were dozens of other women. We all were. We were all understudies for one another, and we didn't even know it, all feeding into the same twisted fantasy that felt all too real. The story begins for me as a hopeful 19-year-old girl in the midst of pursuing an education in creative writing. Prior to my first English class at my university, I looked my prospective professor up on the internet. You know, those quirky rate my professor sites that we all feed into. The comment section floored me as soon as I entered his name, as I was met with reviews of what an attractive and wonderful human being he was. As you can imagine, as I sat patiently in the back of the room on the first day of class, I expected a Brad Pitt look-alike to appear. So when I was met with a pudgy, balding man in his late 30s, my mind whirled as I looked at my friend to my left and shrugged, feeling silly for bragging about how attractive this man was going to be. He entered class 10 minutes late with a wild smirk on his face. His hair is uncombed wisps that desperately tried to cover the evidence of premature aging. His face was swollen looking, with beady green eyes that sunk into his head, darting back at the wall and the tile ceiling. He had the physique of a man that spent most of his afternoons sitting at a desk, throwing back beers, stains on his khakis and buns missing on his blazer. His faded white collared shirt was wrinkled and tucked into his pants in a haphazard way. He was meticulously lazy. He wanted you to know that he didn't care, every move calculated in such a way that you believed what he wanted you to believe. Looks aside, this man was a comedic genius and a real savant with words. He spent half of the class telling ridiculous stories, chock full of cuss words and euphemisms. His personality made up for the rest of him in a big way. Of course, it's later to be revealed that this personality was all an act, a work of twisted and diluted art. Our first assignment was a personal essay. I chose to write a highly descriptive narrative depicting what it was like to be a female MMA fighter. It was less than 2 pages long, and most of it was spent describing what hot asphalt felt like on human palms while doing push-ups in July. I tell you this because the response that followed my submission of this essay would make you think that I wrote a how-to manual on how to give a blowjob. After our first writing assignment, and a few weeks later, I sent him an email asking if he knew how I could become more involved with creative writing on campus. I mean, that's what professors are there for, right? They're there to help you achieve what you want to pursue in life. I was directed to seek out whoever is involved with the school paper and see if I could be of any service. I politely thanked him and then was met with this response. I like the way you write. There's an intimacy, an energy, and vibrancy about it, a closeness of detail and imagery that generates real emotion. For me, this literally came out of nowhere, and the basis of how I was as a writer was only portrayed through my personal essays on boxing and octagon rings, but let me tell you, I ate that shit up. You see, as a young female writer who wants nothing more than to be an accomplished and published author, this is actually what we want to hear. I thanked him and virtually blushed. He replied, "It helps that I know you in person, but I feel like your writing matches your persona, and that's an important ability for any writer. I mean, it's no secret that you are an absurdly beautiful girl, and you have a kind of persuasion and quiet comfort and confidence about you. I notice those things about you quite intuitively, and I can feel them translated onto your page, that kind of ease in your own skin and sensuality." I really appreciate that. You have no idea how much it means to me. I would love to be a writer someday, so all you have to offer in terms of advice really helps. You deserve it. I'm gonna assume that you know that you are quite gorgeous because, well, how couldn't you? But you show an ability to grant that beauty and sensuality a kind of artistic vibe and spirit. It becomes something as opposed to just being something or what you look like in a static way. Sometimes beauty is just about being sexually desirable, and that grows boring after a time. Yours is a kind of active, creative idea and identity, if that makes sense. You don't shy away from your sex appeal in your writing, nor do you commercialize it in its easy way. You translate it into a kind of closeness and intensity of imagery and experience that you are privy to. And know what? You never have to feel appreciative. You are smart, talented, sweet, unique, creative, beautiful. It's not exactly a chore to be around you, you know? Wow. I am completely flattered. Could I give you some of my writing samples to proofread and give me feedback on? You are being an immense help. Of course! You help me just as much. Having people like you in my life is what makes it worthwhile. What gives you the energy to think and create and feel and leave your whole soul out there. Beautiful, insightful, talented, and passionate. You're unique, and that is never lost on me. Thank you. I am truly blushing. It's a pleasure to have someone like you as a professor. The pleasure is all mine, really. I feel lucky to get to know you and hopefully spend some time with you after the term. You are an incredible girl and alluring in every way. Attractive, intellectually, emotionally, and physically. I want to hang out with you no matter where I knew you from. This kind of dialogue continued for quite some time. I truly believe that we had some sort of out-of-this-world connection on a literature level, but nothing else. By this time, he had asked me for my phone number so he could better communicate with me about my writings. I agreed. I saw him as a mentor that I could have for life, someone that would guide me through my writing woes and successes, and of course, the oh-so-eloquent word, vomit of excessive compliments being shoved down my throat didn't hurt either. He had me completely brainwashed. I just didn't know it yet. I sent him more of my writings from time to time. He would call me on my phone and tell me I was a force of nature, a force to be reckoned with that is going to do great things in this world. I was at a loss for words. He also ran a pseudo-dead poet society at night in a rented-out classroom on campus. He had implored for me to attend for quite some time, and when I found the time, I stopped by for an afternoon. However, something felt different that night. In a classroom filled with many other students, his eyes seemed to linger on me for just a tad too long, his smirk resurfacing every time I would laugh at one of his jokes. After the meeting, I scurried back to my dorm and was met with a text message regarding how distracted he was by how I looked that night, and how it was such a sweet and seductive pleasure to have me be in his presence. That night it hit me. Have I gone into more than I can handle? My head felt fuzzy. My hand shook as I sent out a single text that ended up being the literal definition of a game changer. I debated sending this message for a good 10 minutes. What if I was misreading his advances? I would hate to make class awkward by assuming anything. I went for it anyways. Professor, do you have feelings for me? And the response to follow. You're beautiful, provocative, and talented. Of course! I have romantic and sexual thoughts about you. It would be an insult to both of us to even pretend I didn't. But it's really cool that it is deeper than that too. That we can still have an awesome, meaningful relationship right now and figure out the more personal, romantic, and sexual stuff as we go along. I guess what I'm trying to say is, being attracted to you does not blind me from the cool connection we already have, But yes, I am of course attracted to you, and I would be a liar if I pretended that I wasn't thinking about how nice it would be to kiss you. The first thing that came to my mind was, am I the only one? I wanted to know if this was the kind of behavior he participated in often, so I made some sort of sarcastic and smartass retort as to whether or not he frequents it to picking up his students. I was met with the reply, I certainly don't frequent in picking up students, and I don't think of you in that way anyways. The truth is, I'm not into you because you are a student. I'm into you because you are you, and I would have been no matter what. And I kind of see it as a grand coincidence that you happen to be a student at the university I am professor at. I would find out a year later that being a student was exactly what he was attracted to. You see, there was never any coincidences there. There are no such things as coincidences. We did not meet under the instance of fate. This was a calculated formula that he had spent years mastering and practicing, and I was just his latest victim who majored in naivety. He purposely sought out women that were young, attractive, vulnerable, and under his command as a power figure. He sought out the writers, the young women who were drenched in the smell of hopeless romanticism, the kind of woman that would become weak at the knees for his kind of text message poetry. This was the game he played for years and would continue playing for years after we parted. That night, I fell asleep, phone in hand. I woke up to tens of missed text messages. The telling of these kinds of feelings is always better in person. But even better than that is the kind of unscripted, spontaneous reactions and looks on faces. Nervous moving of hands or feet or whatever. Those are pretty cool and always better in person. One thing about me that you must know, sex is just boring and stupid if it's only physical. You are insanely sexy, but the truth is I am over that. Because if there wasn't some inexpressible thing there with it, it would bore me in about 5 seconds. Yes, you are sexy and evoke a physical reaction, but that doesn't matter. You are alluring to all of my senses and my mind and my heart, and that is what is cool. And it's what makes your physical beauty and sex appeal matter. God, what I confess to you made me want you even more. It's an intoxicating feeling that is not at all just physical. It has this artistic, passionate quality too. I felt nauseous. I contemplated responding and putting it off for a few hours. What I had gotten myself into, I was met with more messages as time passed that day. And I must tell you that I went to sleep. I had this amazingly intense desire to be really deep inside you as I kissed you softly, your lips, your neck, your chest. But the thing was, that wasn't it at all. It was coupled with an equally intense desire to hear your voice softly in my ear afterwards, just to talk and laugh and be. I felt as if I was in over my head with this. I began drinking whole bottles of wine before class, not being able to look him in the eyes, that goddamn smirk of his. It would follow me around the classroom like a plague, and about a month later of me avoiding him outside the classroom, my drinking had worsened. I had prescribed Xanax for the anxiety that I was feeling, and one night, I almost finished half a bottle of those nasty little blue pills when I received a text message from him. "Come over. We need to talk." I needed this to be over, and maybe this was my chance. The warm embrace of the drugs and the wine in the back of my throat told me everything was going to be okay. I got behind the wheel of my car and plugged the address he gave into my phone's GPS. When I arrived, he led me inside and locked the door behind us. The apartment was nothing but one big room with the world's smallest couch resting on the side. My eyes widened. I could die here, I thought. The drugs seeped deeper into my bloodstream, and I shook off the thought. He showed me his bedroom, a dirty mattress propped up against the wall, with a box television set on the floor next to it that was loudly streaming an episode of South Park. I asked for water, and he told me to take a seat. Now, When I tell you this couch, mind you, the only place to sit in the whole apartment was small, it is an understatement. The couch was made so if two people sat on it together, they would be forced to touch legs, touch sides, touch arms. Thinking back on it, I wouldn't even be surprised if that couch wasn't some sort of calculated purchase to ensure his entrapment succeeds. I sat on the armrest of the couch and avoid having to actually sit together. He gave me a glass of water and I chugged it. He asked me if I was nervous and smirked. I said no, a lie. He talked about his family, about novels he's read, about his bookshelf, about where he has traveled. He asked me about my roommates and seemed uneasy when I told him they knew the address of his apartment in case I didn't return. He told me about his feelings for me. I sat in silence and drank water. He excused himself to go to the bathroom, and I could hear him peeing just a few feet away. What have I done? Exiting the bathroom, he made for a seat on the couch once again, except instead of sitting down, he walked past the seat and lunged towards me. Grabbing the back of my head and pulling my face up to his, he kissed me. It was wet, it was sloppy. I pulled my head away and looked at my feet. For a reason I will never understand, I said, "I'm sorry." I asked to leave, and he walked me to my car. As I pulled out of the apartment complex parking lot, he followed my car halfway down the road, smirking and waving the whole way. I got back to my dorm that night after meeting him at his apartment. I locked my bedroom door and cried. A text message appeared on my phone. "You, my dear, are an impossible woman not to kiss. I feel silly telling you how amazing it was to be with you because it is beyond my expression. Every hour has been a fight against my willpower and logic to not plead with you to come back so we could wake up in the same bed, smelling like each other, tasting like each other. Being next to you is intoxicating. Kissing you was a wonderful feeling. It made me yearn to be close to you, inside of you, not even for the physicality of it, but because that is the purest, most raw, and most real and deep way to experience the emotional and intellectual aspects of it." What was happening? Did he not see the fear on my face as I left? He was making it seem like we had some sort of epic night of romance that shook the world and the ground we walked on. I didn't understand. He had his way of convincing me things were happening that were not really there, that emotions existed that were only in his mind. Now again, Reddit, I'm new to posting. There, of course, were other messages that he sent me after I left that I omitted from this telling. They were very sexually graphic and explicit, and to be honest, I'm not sure what the grounds are for being sexually explicit on Let's Not Meet. This is Tafoo where anything goes, so I just wanted to tread lightly. But in short, these messages were vile, very specific, and made me think of myself as something he got off to on his lonely mattress in the dark confines of his apartment. So anyways, after that night, I cut him off completely. I told him to only talk to me if it was in regards to my studies, class, or any academic matters. I was met with this response. "You would not like to see me in opportune not-classroom setting? Well, the want to part is unwavering for me. The wanting to be near you, to spend time with you, when the only noises we can hear are each other's voices and heartbeats. The desires for those moments doesn't go away, and it won't." I tried to move on. The semester ended. Over the summer, we had some contact. He asked me on dates. He sent me his writing. I tried to look past the romantic feelings he shared with me and try my best to coexist within his world he had constructed. And then, the webs that he had weaved began to unravel. Other female students approached me, not for any other reason than light conversation and gossip. They asked me playfully if he emailed me a lot too, telling me that he would email them and compliment them on their appearance, tell them they had such potential, and what a blessing it was to have them in his classroom. One girl even mentioned to me that he had asked her if she would ever sleep with him. My blood was boiling at this point. I've been so naive and so blind to what was actually going on. I was not special. He did not care about my writings. He was a serial seducer of his female students, a predator, a liar. He used women to feed his own egos, his own needs. He was an actor in his own play, and we were all his pawns to toy with. I sent him a long and angry text, citing that I knew he had been seducing other female students. I told him that he truly was a great writer of fiction. For his whole life, his personality, everything, it was all lies that he had constructed. I was met with an immediate response. I'm just a little touchy about this subject because of the fact that I'm young and not married. Every time someone sees me talking to someone, they say, "Oh, I wonder if he and her are on this or that, etc." And I get that that's just life and comes with the territory, but I would never want anyone to get the wrong impression. I spent 95% of my professor career in my 20s, and because of that, I have more of a social type of conversation with my students of both sexes. It's just my personality. But I say as God, as my witness, that I have never created a conflict of interest or even taken advantage of that position for personal, social, or sexual gain, ever. I revere being a professor. I don't know why I justify myself as someone who judged me without a conversation, but I like and respect you, and it's worth it to me. As God be my judge, it's the truth. I told him that a student showed me emails that he had sent them. Emails that explicitly cited examples of him trying to seduce them. I was then met literally with the most bullshit lie anyone has ever told me in my 22 years of living. Oh God, I know exactly what you're talking about now. This is gonna sound stupid, but my jerk friend Pete was staying with me, and my email was open as my homepage. He thought it'd be a hilarious practical joke to write to people in my inbox. I know how stupid that sounds, but I swear on my sick father's life, that's the truth. I promise on everything holy that this is what happened. I've forgotten all about it, but I'm not gonna bring it up again because the whole thing is ridiculous and painful in ways I can't explain. But just from you to me, as someone I care about and deeply respect, I promise you that's what happened. Pete and I were best friends since age 5, and the truth is, we haven't talked since that happened because he had no remorse or understanding of the consequences of that kind of joke. I already lost a dear friend over this, and I bring it up now because I don't want to bring distance between me and anyone else I care about. I've been over vigilant about that sort of thing, and to have him make a mockery of all crushed and angered me beyond words. I swear on my mother, father, everything in this world, if you want to judge me even though you literally have no clue what went down, then I suppose there's nothing I can do about it. It's not science. I wish there was some forensic way I could prove it, but I can't. It's just truth. And I unfortunately have no way of proving it, but it's true. But go ahead and think you know everything about somebody when you know zero, absolutely zero. You are a liar. That message was the greatest piece of fiction you've ever written. I understand your feelings on this, and honestly, I would feel the same. But you should again know that you're being ignorant. When I found out he had sent out emails, I wrote the whole thing up and had him sign in, and I gave it to my department chair just in case any problems came up. There's papers on file about this. I was hoping you might give me the benefit of the doubt without going into all this nonsense, but you just don't know anything about what happened. Sorry for the whole thing, but you just don't know. I can show you the paperwork, but it's all worthless and we can't be people about it anyways. If you're only gonna assume the worst all the time, I'm not a fool, and I revere the academy. I mean, I was mesmerized by you, and still never said a word until you turned the conversation into that direction. That's all I have to say. Have a nice night. I hope we can move past this. Remember, even with you, remember that I didn't initiate any social contact. I would never have initiated that. It's just not something I would do. My head imploded. He was such a superb liar that I think even he believed them to be true. I was the one that started all of this. This was my fault. I asked for this. This man was the godfather of manipulation. For a brief moment, I stopped and thought to myself, did I cause all of this? He was good. He was so good at what he did. But I think after that conversation, he knew the jig was up. I truly think part of him realized that I was becoming too smart for his game. Later that day, I received an email. Fuck. This is killing me. Listen, I say this with no motive or want. I'm just gonna go ahead and acknowledge right now that there's no chance for us to be anything romantic. So I speak to you now with no motive at all, just as a human being who cares about you. Please know that I'm not some guy who uses professorship to sweet talk every pretty girl he sees. That's not who I have been in my life, nor it's what I will ever be in my life. So please let us move on as people. And I acknowledge we have no romantic bond at all. And I say this to you only as someone whose heart would be broken if someone I care for so deeply about thought that's who I am. I'm an emotional person, so I take things very hard in every context. And I just want to say I'm sorry for being combative about the whole thing, as I understand how you feel. I'm certainly guilty of liking to hear myself talk, having an ego, thinking I'm charming, and running my mouth too much from time to time. All those things that I'll willingly admit to, and all things that I'm trying to work on being less vain about. But the specific things you saw were not written by me, nor have I ever initiated any social or romantic contact with someone in one of my classes. I revere the grace of what I'm privileged to do, and have been hyper vigilant to be about that grace and not to cheapen or demean the great job I'm so lucky to do every day by using it to seem cool or try to sweet talk girls or whatever. And all that just comes from my heart because it matters to me. I'm not trying to salvage any hypothetical future chance you might have at a romantic relationship. I resolve myself to the fact that it's an impossibility for a myriad of reasons. But just know I never did anything. I didn't hear from him again after this. My drug addiction to anxiety pills and alcohol began to escalate. I started counseling at the school to talk about the professor. The counselor urged me to come forward. I was still hesitant. I stopped going to class, started to isolate, and began partying my life away, leading me to get kicked out of my living quarters by my roommates. I wasn't at rock bottom yet, but I was certainly on the right train heading there. When I felt like I had nothing else to lose, I sent an email to the campus police briefly describing the situation. He requested that I typed up every text message or email that I had and construct a document with all evidence and correspondence in it. I did so. However, after reading my document, the head of the campus police looked me in the eyes and asked, "Now, you can be honest with me. Are you responsible for starting all of this?" My face turned a pale white, and I left his office. He called me numerous times to give further testimonies. I never answered, and I never went back. It was cowardly of me to just drop a shitstorm of information like that off and then bail. But I didn't want any further part in the investigation. I did not hear from John again, but I heard he got fired, and it was true. He was no longer on the professor roster. I drove by his apartment sometimes on the way to the bank, but his apartment had a for sale sign on the lawn. I'm not gonna lie, it made me smile. I wanted him to lose everything. I felt accomplished for a time, but that dwindled soon thereafter. I would go to parties where other classmates of John's would be, and they would taunt me. "Hey, what happened to John? You give him one too many blowjobs?" I dropped out of the university and transferred to another school in a different state, my home state. I slowly but surely began writing more. After hitting a horrendous rock bottom, I got sober and shortly after started a blog that depicted stories of my drug and alcohol addiction. I was feeling rather empowered and bold one day, and I decided to write a blog post about my experiences with sexual harassment. Now, this post mainly concerned other atrocities that's happened to me, but very briefly I mentioned my run-in with John, the sociopathic professor. The catch? His name was never mentioned, nor the school. All I did was cite phrases that he would use on me, all very ambiguous. 2 months later, I received this email. "Hi, I came across your blog a few days ago, and I felt compelled to email you in response to your post. Very long story short, I'm a student there, and I know exactly the professor you're talking about in your post. By writing about your experience and sharing your story, you've made me realize how naive I've been and what manipulative, lying, abhorrent person he is. You start out your post by saying how much you didn't want to write it, but I'm writing this to thank you. You've helped me more than you know because I now realize I need to sever all ties with him immediately. So thank you. Thank you. I wanted to throw my phone into heavy traffic and scream. I was furious. I thought I had stopped him. I knew that by getting fired he would have learned, but there he is, teaching at other universities, doing the same thing. I knew I couldn't let this go. I needed closure, and I needed to end this for good. After hearing that John was at another university, and at it again, my blood was boiling. This is where I might lose 70% of you viewers that had my back. I could have let this go. I could have lived in another state and had a pretty decent life. I could have walked away and said, well, it's her problem, and leave it at that, but I didn't. Something inside of me felt morally obliged to finish what I had started. The main reason I reported him was so he would never be able to manipulate and torment young female students again. I truly thought that I had failed and that it was my responsibility to fix it. I could not understand how someone who was fired for sexual harassment could still obtain teaching jobs. I doubt the information was ever disclosed and was just swept under the college rug. I decided to ask the girl who emailed me, Emily, what her story was. He started out emailing me about how beautiful my writing was, but I never responded because I don't consider myself a writer, so I don't care so much to asking him more about it. Soon after that, he told the class he was working on a manuscript, and if anyone wanted to read it, just to email him and he'd send it. So that's what I did. I mean, if your professor's writing a novel, why wouldn't you want to read it? So he sent it back to me, and I didn't get around to reading it for a while. So he emailed me, asking what I thought of it and any feedback I had. So I emailed him back and said I hadn't gotten to reading it yet. So he emailed me back and said he'd love to know what I thought of it once I read it, and maybe after the semester we could meet up to talk about it. So a couple months go by, and it's the very end of the semester. So he takes the whole class for pizza, and everything seems pretty normal, but he specifically asked me about my boyfriend and if I lived with him, which is the first thing I found strange about him. So he emailed me later that night, giving me his number and asking if I wanted to meet up to discuss his writing to text him, but I never did. So he emailed me saying he was really interested in my opinion and he really wanted to meet up, so I gave him my number and we meet a week or two later. That's when he started texting me, a little at first, then more and more frequently, but nothing inappropriate. By now, spring semester had started, and it was mostly just, I like what you had to say in class today, or you look pretty. He's good at reading people, and I think he knew I wouldn't take any sexual shit if he tried to pull it right off the bat. Then it got more into, I feel this special bond with you, and if I'm being completely honest, I have sexual and romantic feelings for you, but I know your situation, and I respect you too much to ever do something to jeopardize that bond we have. He then said, I like you too much to just kiss you and possibly lose you forever over it, and I like you so much as a person that I want to be around you, and I know we can't have anything romantic, but I feel like I need to be friends with you. I can keep it completely platonic despite my other feelings for you, and I believed him. So we met up for coffee or pizza or whatever a handful of times, always public places, because as much as I believed what he said, I still knew something was fishy about him. I also let him know that my boyfriend knew where I was and that I was with him. But his text started getting more and more inappropriate, and I would just try to change the subject and just ignore what he was saying until it got too out of hand. So that brings us to a few weeks ago. I told him I needed not to talk to him anymore, and he basically said, okay, but just so you know that something is eventually going to happen between us. And even though he hasn't made any moves, it's only because he respects me too much, and he's resolved to let me be the one who initiates anything romantic and sexual. So, I received a couple emails from him with some of his writings, and I would just email him back and say thanks for sending it, and he would email me back saying that he missed me. Then, in I assume a very desperate act, he started telling me about you and what happened. And I took this bait and texted him in response. I just meant to text him a quick little message, so he went back to like I never asked him to stop talking to me. Very inappropriate right off the bat. So I asked him your name, just because I was curious, and I googled you, and I didn't find anything too curious, so I let it be. But he was back to being so comfortable telling me things I didn't want to hear after me telling him I didn't want to speak to him 2 weeks earlier. And then more red flags than normal were raised, so I googled you again, just to see if I could find any articles or anything to tell me what really happened between you two at university, and I found nothing. And that's when I came across your blog, and I had an epiphany to say the least. So he texted me late Friday night, and I didn't respond. He didn't text me all weekend either. He usually doesn't because he knows my weekend work schedule is a little crazy. At this point, I just finished reading your blog, so all weekend I was going back and forth, should I reach out to you or not, because it's really hard to decipher his truths from his lies. So as you know, I just went for it on Monday. Then he texted me yesterday morning, and then I told him I wanted to go back to not talking to him anymore. So he said, "Emily, I know how you feel, so you know I'm sad when we can't talk or see each other, but you know I'll give you whatever you need. And I want it to work. I want it to be right. Whatever it takes. You're wonderful, Emily. Completely. You're definitely on my mind." To which I just responded, "Okay." After reading her email, I asked her if she would ever report him. She was very hesitant, due to the fact that her mother was also a professor at the university, and that made things very complicated for her. I know none of you know me personally, but I can't sit quietly about things like this. Being the victim of a rape and countless situations where sexual harassment or overt creepiness is involved, this really hit home for me, especially when I knew this man personally and what he was capable of. I looked at my phone, and for the first time in about 3 years, I looked up the name in my contacts, John Kerrigan. The following ensued through text message. "You have learned absolutely nothing from your past actions." From what happened at that university? I know I was immature and cavalier, and I absolutely learned and grew from that. As God is my father, as my witness, it changed me completely. Oh, so you no longer seek out romantic relationships with female students then, I assume? The truth is I never really did. Just immaturely like to flirt and get the attention. But no, I've grown out of all that stuff completely. There was a time when I enjoyed the mysteries and flirtations, but I learned my lesson about such things and learned what's important. I've become humble. It's quite a thing, but I've humbled myself and become less selfish in a crazy way. I do have to thank you for that. I didn't lash out at you, even right when it happened. I didn't yell and scream or even ask you why. I thought it was a bad idea for us to be in touch, but if we had been in touch, I would have only asked for a chance at forgiveness, nothing else. How about that bullshit stories of yours about Pete and all those emails he sent to girls in your classes? We react badly when we're embarrassed. I make no excuses. I was embarrassed and reacted like a teenager. I was an immature jackass. I make no excuses for that. You're still baiting your students with your writing, I presume. It's available if people ask for it. You and I first connected as writers. That's where the raw connection feeling came from. I'm sorry that I got all fucked up in ego and vanity, truly. But maybe we can put the bad stuff behind us and focus on the good. You can write. It's as simple as that. You're natural. It's very rare. I want you to know that the things we do in life and the choices we make will always come back to us. Don't forget that. At this point, I think he begins to understand that I am onto him, because he starts off with a new weapon, bribery. He uses my dream career to bait me. Just so you know, there's no expiration date for this. I'll be teaching a creative writer's workshop, and if you want a guest lecture, the offer stands. I figure maybe that's a decent way to focus on positive things and put the negative things in the past. People would really benefit from your perspective. Really? Are you joking? It would not be a good idea for me to be a guest lecturer for a professor I got fired. I would lose any credibility, and I choose what is right. From my point of view, I think it's actually possibly lend more credibility and its clear show of mutual maturity and no hard feelings and a focus on good and positive things instead of past grudges and mistakes. Also, I wouldn't introduce you as this is whoever, she got me fired. Life is usually long and winding. We've both done things we wish we could take back, and we've both paid severely for them. I think all we can do is try to be the best people we can going forward. That's what I offered. But I respect your position, and I stand in years to come if you change your mind. And this might sound strange, but the truth is, I've been trying to be the kind of person you'd be proud of. I keep that specifically in my mind. It's how I matured and grew out of the silliness. My head was going to explode, and I stopped responding. He was toxic and willing to cut open his wrist until all the possible lies flowed out before ever telling an ounce of the truth. Without mentioning Emily's name, I wrote an email to the campus police about John Kerrigan. It may be too long to post here, as I'm already probably making this way longer than I intended, but it stated that what he had done to me in the past, what he had been fired for, and what the student from their university told me wasn't my problem or my business. No, not exactly. But to be honest, I didn't care. He didn't deserve another second to stand up in front of a classroom full of hopefuls and mentally pick out his next victim. I wanted closure. I needed it. 2 weeks later, I receive a text message. On my father's grave, I promise you I have no improper intentions towards anyone at the university. I swear on everything holy that I'll never do that. I've grown out of all that ego. May God strike me down if I'm lying. Please, I beg you to stop punishing me for past bad feelings. I beg you. And swear on my late father I will do nothing improper. My university just called to say you complain about me. It's all I have left. One of your students followed me and reached out to me. All I did was forward the information along and left it there. I don't understand. How could someone find you? Doesn't matter. I was stupid and paid the price, so I'll deal with whatever awkwardness my reputation causes me. I deserve that. That's my responsibility. You and I can leave our stuff in the past and just do our best going forward, right? Someone really did reach out to me, whom of which I've gotten to know over the past few weeks, and told me an eerily similar story. We're only as sick as our secrets, so if there is anyone out there that you need to talk to or apologize to for being a little more than friendly with, maybe that's something to ponder about. You get second chances, you don't get thirds. Someone at the university? I'm racking my brain, I can't think of who it could be. I do talk too much, and a lot of what I say can be misconstrued, but the truth is what happened between us was good. It grew me up. It changed me. I'll be even more vigilant now. I have no non-professional discussions of any kind with anyone, male or female. I pledge that. That was the last I heard from him. 1 week later, I received an email from the head of investigations at the university he was teaching at. They decided to fire him. Emily emailed me later that day and said that John Kerrigan had sent an email out to her and her classmates, regrettably informing them that he was making the decision to leave the university and pursue other things. He told them that he would love to still meet them in a non-classroom setting for pizza, and to hold a weekly literary group at a local cafe with all who would care to join. It was then that I realized you cannot change a sociopath.